Should the young and poor pay to maintain the living standards of rich pensioners?
Where does UKIP stand on this?
Well, I think what Osborne is doing is he's playing politics on this issue. I mean, at first they were talking about getting the 12 billion, or making a start on the 12 billion from wealthy pensioners. They were looking at the winter fuel allowance, the TV licence, the bus pass. But then they backtracked, because generally pensioners and wealthy pensioners vote, and generally, I suspect, will vote Conservative. So what they've done instead is they're attacking the most vulnerable in society, who generally don't vote Conservative. What they're doing is they're looking at housing benefit for under 25s. They're also looking at people who live in council houses who earn over £60,000. But from my sums, that only adds up to £1 billion worth of savings out of 12 billion. So there's still a huge black hole.
Are you in favour of cuts in welfare?
Well, look, the welfare budget under Labour spiralled out of control to the point whereby it was costing each household £3,000 extra. And it could not go on. Something had to be done. But let me just give you an answer on the 12 billion. There is another budget there which is ring-fenced, which comes to around 12 billion. It's called the foreign aid budget. The foreign aid budget. Now, I'm not against giving money to countries who are in dire need, people who need to be fed. But what I am opposed to is giving money to countries like Argentina, who sabre-rattle over the Falklands, Brazil, which has just overtaken us.
So you can save your 12 billion that way.
Well, look.
Sorry, let's get it clear. Wait a minute. Are you in favour of cuts in the welfare budget or not? Yes or no?
I believe there do have to be cuts, but I believe that the cuts are being made in the wrong area, and I believe the way you should pay for these cuts is by going for the foreign aid budget and taking money off countries that don't need it, because, quite frankly, that's your tax, that's your money, and that foreign aid budget should be spent on our own people in this country.
The reason that we had this debt and deficit issue coming out of the crash that was caused by the bankers was because tax receipts plummeted. The idea that if you just abolish the Department for International Development's budget, it will sort everything.
Is because you guys maxed out the credit cards of the country. That's why.
With the greatest respect, Paul, your solution to the situation we are in with public finances at the moment is just to abolish the Department for International Development and everything will be OK. No, we need to get more people into work and earning more.
Charity begins at home.
The problem is, as Paul said, as the gentleman here mentioned, older people vote more in greater numbers than younger people do, and they have. They feel that they've paid into a system for all their lives and they think they should get something out of it towards the end. But the issue is that you didn't pay into a savings account all that time and the money's allotted for you to come and get when you're 65. It's been spent already. It's gone.
When is it ever right to shoot someone who hasn't been unarmed?
Who is unarmed?
Sorry, who has been unarmed.
When is it ever right
to shoot someone
who's unarmed? Not when is it legal, but when is it right? Mark Duggan, of course.
I think that video cameras on the equipment of firearm officers, I think, would make a lot of sense. I think it would provide us with greater transparency and more accountability. It would give us, as people, probably a greater understanding and a greater sympathy, I suppose, in many ways, about the difficult job that these people do, because decisions have to be made in split decisions. We're not talking about minutes here. We're talking literally seconds. You know, it works for the armed forces. We had the prosecution which came off the back of the murder in Afghanistan, where that type of equipment was used. So I think it makes perfect sense to incorporate it into firearm services here in this country.
Michelle's question wasn't whether it was legal, but whether it was right ever to shoot someone who's unarmed.
Well, I think...
Slightly different question.
Well, I think the officer involved obviously thought that his or others' lives were in danger, and the jury have supported that version. And look, you know, the jury have looked at this for 3 months. They've interviewed 93 people. You know, this has been they've had a real in-depth look at this. And, you know, let's not forget, these are 10 people who were chosen randomly, performing a civic duty. And I'm sorry, I don't think it helps when politicians come out. I think it's irresponsible, actually, when they try to question the decision that the jury have come to. I must say that the family coming out this morning as well and calling for calm, you know, you've got to give them respect for that, absolutely. Okay. And I like the noises.
You say.
I like the noises which have come out of the Metropolitan Police today, and the fact that the Commissioner has gone to Tottenham to meet community leaders. Let's just hope for calm, and let's hope things work out and people can move forward.
I think there are a number of aspects to this case, and there's the human aspect, which is Mark and Mark's family. My own brother died at the same age as Mark, and, you know, my heart crunched every time you hear of a young man. I know the pain. I can understand, you know, that pain of loss of a sibling. And it's, you know, they must have been through this horrific process of waiting for the trial, and all the misinformation and being briefed against must have just compounded insult upon injury and made their grief so much more intense. And then there's the other side of the case about what actually happened. My understanding is the police had intelligence that Mark was collecting a gun. They followed the car. The gun was in the car. Mark left the car with the gun in his hand. He lifted the gun. We know now to throw it. If you're the policeman who's facing him, when Mark lifts his hand with that gun, how do you know he's going to throw it? How do you know he isn't going to aim at you? And I would just ask the question, what was Mark doing with a gun in his hand? Where was he going with that gun? What was he going to do with it? And I think if you carry a gun in London, you take a risk. And I think it was an appalling situation. I am really glad to hear that the police are now going to wear cameras, so that every single second of what happens, because, you know, 53 people were killed by guns in London over the last 3 years, I think it is, and 3 police shots have been fired. So, you know, just putting that in context, the police are keeping us safe. 53 people were killed with guns. It seems to be a growing problem, and I think it's one that we need to look carefully at, because the police are dealing with a very difficult situation, which is a rise in gun crime.
Okay.
And I think cameras on their uniforms is a very good way about making this problem doesn't happen again.
I'll take one more point from you, sir.
Now that the tidal wave of Romanian and Bulgarian immigrants has failed to materialise, will the racist rhetoric now subside, and will Romanians and Bulgarians once more feel welcome in this country?
You're Romanian yourself, aren't you, sir?
Yes,
yeah? You are, yes, right. Well, will the racist rhetoric subside, Paul Nuttall?
How did I know you were coming to me first? Well, look, we've said all along we don't know how many Romanians and Bulgarians will come. We just don't know.
There's 2.
Look. When was New Year? Look. Migration Watch UK, for example, say that 50,000 will come per year for the next 5 years. That's 250,000. The Institute for Democracy is saying it will be 385,000 over the next 5 years, which is a city not dissimilar to Bristol. What we're saying in UKIP is quite simply, it makes no sense economically to have a whole open border to the whole of Europe, because we have to whilst we're members of the European Union, because freedom of movement of peoples is enshrined in the treaties. It makes no sense whatsoever to have an open door when you have 2.4 million people unemployed and 1 million young people in this country who can't get a job. It makes no sense whatsoever to saturate the employment market any further. And on top of that, you know, freedom of movement of people might work when you've got economies of a similar size, and also where the wages are similar. So ourselves, France, the Scandinavian countries. Where it doesn't work is, take for example Bulgaria, where the average wage is €350 a month, the minimum wage is €150 a month. Look, the traffic will only be one way. And quite frankly, we don't think we can cope. And what we'd like to see is a points-based system in this country, where if you've got the skills that this country needs, yes, please come here and work, but it makes no economic sense to have an open door whilst we have 1 million of our own young people unemployed.
You want to come back on that?
Yes, there have been any number of surveys done which have proved that actually immigration is of a positive economic benefit to this nation.
Well, actually, there's been a number of studies which prove actually it doesn't. And I know Nigel Farage made the point the other day, and I concur. You know, if it means that we're a little less poorer, I would like to see us control our own borders, because if we carry on the way we're going, the population of this country will be 88 million by 2060, and quite frankly, I think we're pretty full already.
I find the way we have discussed the migration issue utterly appalling, completely disgusting, obnoxious, offensive and very un-British, and I'd like it to just try and change and grow up and be sensible.
Well, of course, in order to go for the populist cheer, Susie, of course, didn't mention the fact that David Cameron has no authority whatsoever over our own borders and the European Union and how many people come here. We actually can't set immigration targets on who comes to us from within the European Union. We have no idea how many people are going to come, but we do know how many millions of people have the right to come if they want to. Now, a large part of Britain this week has seen, well, over the last few weeks and over Christmas, has seen flooding. One of the problems with flooding is we're building on our floodplains. And so we have less and less area of the country where water can drain away from. Now, you might think, oh, well, that's not particularly an issue, we can deal with that. Well, you might think that as long as you're not living in the areas that have been flooded. Now, the only way we can control immigration into this country is to leave the European Union. David Cameron has no legal powers to stop anybody from in the European Union coming here and settling here if they want to. That's what our entry of the European Union means.
And what we need to do is transform our economy
so we grow
that we grow our manufacturing base and deliver more jobs that pay more money, and then that will solve the problem, not just putting out...
You can do it in 13 years.
Hang on. You guys allowed in 13 years more people to come to this country than in 1,000 years previous. You'll have 4 million net to come.
And you've been apologising for it ever since.
And you've been apologising for it ever since. And you totally miscalculated. And all you've done in working-class towns and cities up and down the country is people have come on site, onto building sites, people have been undercut, and British workers have been driven off, and now you find them either unemployed or driving taxis in many cases.
We've heard Jack Straw and David Blunkett apologising, saying this was a mistake. Well, you can include Peter Mandelson if you like.
Yes.
And you don't apologise for it? You think Labour's made no mistake?
No, I certainly wouldn't say that. I see absolutely no suggestions whatsoever coming from your party that will help the communities that you're talking about.
You don't do it by saturating the job market even further. And that's what's happening.
77% of people in this country, you'll have seen the statistic according to the British Social Attitudes, who want to see immigration cut. What is Labour's answer to that?
The founders of the European Union had in mind free movement of workers, not free movement of job seekers. And undoubtedly, we do have to work with our European partners to deal with that. And actually, I mean, I met with a number of them this week. They're very open to that.
Sorry, what is free movement of workers, not of job seekers? So you can't go and look for a job.
Well, look...
You can only...
No. The point is, if you come over...
This is a radical reform of the EU treaty coming along.
Given overcrowding in A&E and maternity departments, how will the ongoing programme of closures help?
From what I've read, and I've briefly read up on the Lewisham situation, is that the protest group took Mr Hunt to court, and they won, and Mr Hunt appealed in October and lost, and congratulations, well done to all you guys. And also from what I've read, I mean, Lewisham wasn't failing anyway. But, however, if I can just move on quickly...
You're against the NHS anyway, aren't you?
No, I'm not against the NHS. I would like to see the NHS streamlined. The NHS is too... the NHS is too big at the moment.
You say I quote you, the very existence of the NHS stifles competition. Well, that's what you told them.
Well, I genuinely believe that competition drives quality. Equally, the NHS, the cost of the NHS trebled under Labour. We're getting older, the population's going up. We're going to have a debate pretty soon in this country how we fund healthcare, because I'm telling you now, within the next 20 years, it's going to be unsustainable if we continue on the road that we're on.
But when you say its very existence stifles competition, and it's, I quote you again, as long as it's the sacred cow of British politics,
we need to
we'll suffer with... So what do you want for the health service? We pay for it.
Well, we need to have a debate in this country how we're going to fund healthcare in the next century. I'll give you another statistic. It's stuffed with managers. For every nurse, there's 2 managers. You know, only for 48% of people who work for the NHS in England aren't clinically trained. I want to see money go into nurses and doctors. I want to see red tape cut, and I basically want to see the NHS streamlined so we all get a better service.
OK, Paul, our time's up.